Welcome to today's deep dive. We know you are always looking for new perspectives, always eager to understand the sort of hidden layers of culture. And today, well, we have a truly fascinating story lined up for you.
Oh, absolutely. It's a really incredible one.
Yeah, so we're exploring this legendary sanctuary for underground film known as Other Cinema. It was located right in the heart of San Francisco's Mission District.
Right.
And we've got our hands on this brilliant retrospective column that details not just the history of this super unique venue, but also the filmography of its founder, this total visionary named Craig Baldwin.
Yeah, he's such a central figure.
He really is. So our mission today is to unpack how this tiny, unassuming basement screening room transformed into a pivotal hub for independent film history.
And, I think more importantly, what this analog oasis really teaches us about alternative media, curation, and just the rebellious nature of art in general. Because it is, at its core, a profound story about community building. The source material paints such a vivid picture of this era when independent media required, just immense physical effort to simply exist.
Right, let alone actually find an audience.
Yeah, exactly.
So to really grasp that effort, I want you, the listener, to try a little thought experiment with us right now. I want you to mentally step away from your modern, algorithm-driven streaming services.
Just completely leave them behind.
Yeah, forget the endless grids of perfectly polished thumbnails, the trailers that autoplay when you're just trying to read a description.
Ugh, the worst.
Right. Forget those personalized recommendations that somehow seem to know what you want before you even do. Just push all of that pristine digital noise aside.
Clear your mind.
Instead, picture this. It's a Saturday night. You're walking down this narrow, incredibly creaky flight of stairs into a dimly lit basement.
The vibe is already so different.
Totally. The air smells heavily of ozone, old paper, and degrading magnetic tape. Someone hands you a glass of cheap wine in a flimsy plastic cup.
A classic touch.
You look around and you are entirely surrounded by these sagging shelves, just overflowing with chunky VHS tapes, scratched vinyl records, and stacks of obscure radical zines.
And you're about to sit down on a literal folding chair, right?
Exactly. A cold folding chair in the dark, surrounded by a room full of strangers, to watch something completely experimental, entirely unpredictable, and totally outside the mainstream.
Moving from the frictionless digital world you just described into a space that is so incredibly tactile and gritty, really, it's jarring.
It is.
It demands a totally different mindset from you. You aren't just a consumer, passively sitting on a couch. You're a participant in an underground ecosystem.
A physical participant. And that ecosystem is the Artist's Television Access Gallery.
HEA.
Right, often just called ATA. Other Cinema actually operated out of its basement, and the roots of this whole operation go back to around 1984 when Craig Baldwin moved into the area.
Yeah, and you really have to picture San Francisco in the mid-'80s to fully get this.
Oh, for sure.
Because this was long before the tech boom gentrified the city. The Mission District had this incredibly vibrant, gritty, DIY squatter culture going on.
It was a very specific scene.
It was. There was this really potent mix of punk aesthetics and radical political activism.
Hmm.
And Baldwin initially launched these free Saturday experimental screenings under the, frankly, incredibly aggressive name, Eyes of Hell.
Eyes of Hell. I mean, that name just tells you everything you need to know about the initial energy of the project.
Right. It practically screams at you.
Yeah, you are not walking down those creaky stairs to watch a romantic comedy.
Definitely not. It's a completely confrontational title.
Yeah.
It sets the expectation for a visual assault, honestly.
Yeah.
Something provocative that's going to actively challenge your sensibilities.
Right, you're basically signing up to be unsettled. But then it's kind of interesting. In 1987, he renames the series to Other Cinema.
A bit of a shift, yeah.
Yeah, it loses some of that pure punk aggression and becomes something a bit more encompassing, I guess,
Yeah.
while still drawing a massive line in the sand.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it's not the cinema, it's not Hollywood, it is the other.
That name change is crucial, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It establishes the venue as a permanent home for the avant-garde.
Right.
It stops being just an aggressive provocation and becomes a sustained institution. It basically gave visual experiments and social messages a reliable roof over their heads.
And thinking about sitting in that physical space, under that roof, it really highlights a massive contrast with how we consume media today.
Oh, it's night and day.
When you're scrolling through endless digital content on your phone, you are in complete control. And frankly, it's so easy to just disengage.
Yep. 3 seconds in, if it's boring, you're gone.
Exactly. If a video doesn't hook you immediately, you swipe, you skip ahead. But in the basement of other cinema, you can't swipe.
You're stuck there?
You are physically committed. You're in that folding chair. The projector is humming right behind your head. You are surrounded by other people, and you just have to surrender to the shared experience.
You really do.
You have to sit with the discomfort or the confusion until the filmmaker's experiment finally clicks.
Because the physical environment itself enforces patience. It demands an undivided attention that our modern habits, well, they actively discourage it now.
Absolutely.
And that tactile, physical commitment wasn't just required of the audience, by the way. The curation itself,
Yeah.
the actual mechanics of how the art made it onto the screen was deeply analog and labor-intensive.
Okay, yes, let's talk about the mechanics of the submission process because the source details this, and it is just wild to think about today.
It really is.
Like, if you were an indie filmmaker in the San Francisco community and you wanted your work shown at other cinema, you couldn't just send an email.
No emails, no Dropboxes.
You couldn't text a Vimeo link. You had to physically bring your work on a heavy plastic VHS tape directly to Craig Baldwin.
You literally had to travel to the space,
Yeah.
walk down those stairs, and hand over the physical manifestation of your art.
Okay, wait, I have to challenge this process from a modern perspective for a second.
Sure.
You're telling me Baldwin sat in a room and watched hundreds of these VHS tapes in real time?
He did?
That is wildly inefficient. He's essentially acting as a human algorithm for an entire city's indie scene. Doesn't that just make him a massive gatekeeper?
Wow.
Like, why was this physical hand-to-hand curation so vital rather than just letting anyone show whatever they wanted on a Saturday night?
Okay, I hear you. But the term gatekeeper usually carries this really negative connotation, right? It implies someone who arbitrarily blocks access.
Right.
But you have to remember, in a pre-internet world defined by physical scarcity, a curator like Baldwin was a vital filter. We didn't have the infinite shelf space of a YouTube server back then.
That's true. Screen time was literally finite.
Exactly. Screen time was a scarce physical resource. Baldwin wasn't just judging the art to keep people out. He was contextualizing the art to draw an audience in.
Oh, I see. So he was building trust with the room.
Precisely. By hand-selecting these VHS tapes and organizing them into these highly structured spring and fall screening calendars, he created a reliable channel.
Got it.
Audiences knew that if a film survived that rigorous selection process and actually made it onto the other cinema calendar, it was going to be aligned with a certain radical ethos.
So the inefficiency I mentioned, that was actually the filter.
It was. The friction of the physical handoff, the fact that an artist had to care enough to physically travel there, it ensured a baseline of dedication.
That makes total sense.
And for the filmmakers, being selected by a respected peer meant their work was validated. It was placed within a lineage of underground pioneers.
The inefficiency was the point. The friction created the value.
Exactly.
But the guy building that calendar wasn't just a passive observer sitting in a chair judging other people's tapes, right?
Yeah, at all.
The exact same man who was filtering the community's art was also producing the centerpiece films of the other cinema programs.
Right. Baldwin wasn't just organizing the scene. He was actively inventing its artistic language.
Yeah.
The source identifies him as a definitive pioneer of experimental and underground film in his own right.
And his signature style relies on this technique called found footage.
Yes, the found footage approach.
Which is so cool. He isn't renting a camera, hiring actors, and shooting a script. He is sourcing discarded media, old educational films, dusty newsreels, forgotten B-movies, corporate training videos.
All the stuff society throws away.
Exactly. He takes all this cultural detritus, chops it up, and radically reorganizes it. It's essentially visual DJing.
Is exactly visual DJing. And, you know, just like early hip-hop pioneers, Baldwin was taking the discarded scraps of pop culture and stitching them together into completely new compositions.
Right.
But we have to remember the physical reality of this process, too.
Oh, man.
A modern digital DJ can sample a track with the click of a mouse. Baldwin was working with physical magnetic tape.
Right, the sheer physical labor of this is mind-boggling. He's literally unspooling tape, finding the exact frame he wants, cutting it with a razor blade,
A literal razor blade.
and splicing it together with tape. And because he's working with VHS and old film stock, every single time you copy or splice magnetic tape, the quality degrades.
Yep.
You get what's called generation loss, the colors bleed, the audio gets muffled, you get those fuzzy white tracking lines across the screen.
And the brilliant thing is, that degradation actually becomes a crucial part of the aesthetic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it implicitly signals to the viewer that this is not slick, pristine corporate media, the fuzziness, the visual noise. It is the texture of the underground.
It's the vibe.
Exactly. And Baldwin uses this technique specifically to deliver these very sharp political and social critiques.
Right.
By recontextualizing archival footage, he basically forces the audience to look at the underlying messages of everyday media. He takes the images we blindly accept and turns them against themselves to expose society's hidden narratives.
Okay, let's look at how this works mechanically, starting with his 1991 film, Tribulation 99, Alien Anomalies Under America.
Oh, this one is wild.
The plot sounds completely unhinged. He takes the real, historical events of United States covert intervention in Latin America, but he depicts those CIA interventions as though they were a defense against an alien invasion.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
He stitches together footage about UFOs, Hollow Earth concepts, and wild conspiracy theories to satirize American imperialism.
It's basically a masterclass in using the absurd to critique the serious.
It really is. Now, as we look at how Baldwin skewers U.S. foreign policy here, and I just want to jump in with a quick reminder to you listening, we are not taking political sides on this deep dive.
Right, absolutely not.
We are strictly looking under the hood of Baldwin's artistic engine, so to speak, to understand his methods and what the original source says. We aren't endorsing any specific political worldview.
No, we're just analyzing the art.
Exactly. So, purely from an artistic standpoint, how exactly does this satire work psychologically on the viewer? Like, why use aliens to talk about the CIA?
It works because of the psychological weight of the found footage itself.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, think about those old 1950s educational films or newsreels. They always feature a narrator with his deep, booming, authoritative voice.
In today's modern world, that kind of guy.
Yes, exactly. And we are conditioned from childhood to implicitly trust that voice, to view it as objective fact.
Right.
So Baldwin takes that voice of unquestionable authority and splices it over footage of rubber B-movie monsters and flying saucers.
It creates massive cognitive dissonance.
Exactly. If the authoritative tone of a documentary can make a ridiculous story about Hollow Earth aliens sound totally plausible, Baldwin is showing us how easily we swallow manufactured political narratives.
Oh, wow.
He is actively deconstructing the mechanics of propaganda. He's using the ridiculousness of pulp sci-fi to point out what he views as the sheer absurdity and hidden agendas behind official government narratives.
That is so clever. But, once you build an entire career hijacking other people's footage to make these brilliant critiques, you inevitably slam into a massive, heavily fortified wall.
Oh yeah, the legal wall.
Right. Who actually owns those images? And that clash gives birth to his 1995 documentary, Sonic Outlaws. This film completely shifts the focus from geopolitics to the friction between art and copyright law.
The visual DJ runs headlong into the legal realities of the corporate media landscape.
Yeah, he really does.
Sonic Outlaws explores the boundaries of ownership by collaborating with other prominent artists who are also famous for sampling and remixing. Artists like the band Negativland.
Right, and Negativland had just been sued into the ground for sampling a foul-mouthed studio outtake of Casey Pasm in a U2 song.
It was a massive legal mess.
So Baldwin gathers them, along with the Tape Beatles and John Oswald, and makes a movie about how strict copyright laws are destroying art.
Yes.
But wait, I have to ask. If you are making an entire movie arguing against copyright law, and you are doing so by deliberately using heavily copyrighted material without permission, aren't you basically begging a massive corporation to sue you into oblivion? I mean, it's a spectacular meta-rebellion.
But the meta-rebellion is the entire point. Really? Yeah. Sonic Outlaws isn't just a documentary exploring a subject from afar. Its very existence is an active, undeniable demonstration of its central argument.
Ah, I see.
Baldwin and his collaborators are practicing exactly what they preach. They're arguing that human culture has always been built on the reuse, reinterpretation, and modification of what came before.
Right. You can't make new art without standing on the shoulders of old art.
Precisely. To them, locking away images and sounds behind incredibly strict corporate-controlled copyright laws, well, it stifles the natural evolution of expression.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So by building the film out of stolen materials, it forces the viewer, and frankly, dares the legal system, to confront the actual boundaries of fair use.
Right.
If a filmmaker takes a copyrighted image but provides a completely different context and a scathing new critical perspective,
Right.
is it still theft? Or is it a vital new creation?
They essentially turned the documentary format itself into an act of civil disobedience.
Beautifully put, yes.
And as we trace his career into the 2000s, Baldwin's exploration of society's rules expands even further into broader science fiction concepts regarding technology and control.
The scope of his inquiry definitely grows, but the method remains firmly rooted in that archival recombination.
He never abandons the found footage aesthetic.
Never.
The source highlights Spectres of the Spectrum from 1999. It's this sci-fi piece that dives into the history of radio waves, telecommunications, and the intricate, often oppressive relationship between technology and society.
Yeah.
And then, jumping to 2008, he releases Mock-Up on Mu, which centers around the real-life, totally bizarre intersections of L. Ron Hubbard and the rocket scientist Jack Parsons.
Which is a crazy story on its own. But what remains completely consistent across all these films, from the political satire of Tribulation 99 to the technological warnings of his later works, is Baldwin's deep, unwavering suspicion of dominant narratives. Whether those narratives are dictated by the government, by copyright lawyers, or by massive tech conglomerates, he uses the discarded, forgotten fragments of our past to basically warn us about the trajectory of our future.
And his impact is far more than just, a niche piece of 1990 San Francisco trivia.
Oh, absolutely.
The source makes it abundantly clear that Baldwin's films, alongside the physical community space of other cinema, significantly expanded the expressive possibilities of alternative media.
They really move the needle.
And incredibly, other cinema is still actively preserving this legacy today. They offer comprehensive DVD collections of these masterpieces.
Which is so cool.
Yeah, our source refers to these not just as movies to watch on a weekend, but as vital historical and cultural archives for researchers and film lovers.
And, it is incredibly fitting that these works are preserved and distributed on DVD today.
Oh, how so?
Because it's another physical, tangible format. It requires you to actually hold a disc, physically put it in a machine, and intentionally engage with the material.
Oh, right.
It maintains that physical connection to the art that defined the basement of the ATA gallery from day one.
It really does. And to bring this directly back to you, the listener, I know you love diving into these complex histories to find something you can apply to how you view the world.
Right.
And for me, the lasting lesson here is just a powerful reminder that true innovation almost always happens on the fringes, born out of severe limitation.
Always.
Craig Baldwin didn't have Hollywood budgets. He didn't have massive sound stages or pristine digital equipment. He had a damp basement, a razor blade, a stack of heavy VHS tapes, and discarded media that everyone else literally threw in the trash.
Literally garbage.
Right. It proves that you can create brilliant, earth-shattering, thought-provoking work simply by reframing the everyday information that society discards.
Yeah.
You don't always need to invent new materials. Sometimes you just need a radically new way of looking at the old ones.
That is such a profoundly empowering perspective on his body of work. It elevates the often overlooked acts of curation, editing, and recycling to the absolute highest level of artistic creation.
We've gone on quite a journey today.
Really have.
We started by walking down those narrow stairs into that dimly lit, ozone-scented basement of the ATA gallery. We explored the deeply analog, face-to-face curation of VHS tapes that built this fiercely loyal indie community.
Right.
And then we ventured into the mind-bending found footage masterpieces of Craig Baldwin himself, films like Tribulation 99 and Sonic Outlaws, that used the literal scraps of pop culture to challenge our deepest assumptions about politics, ownership, and technology.
Is a remarkable testament to the power of a dedicated physical space and a singular, uncompromising artistic vision, coming together to forge an enduring legacy.
Definitely. Before we let you go, I want to leave you with a final thought, something to really chew on based on how Baldwin built this community.
Right.
Think back to that grueling physical VHS submission process we discussed, the friction of the handoff. In today's digital age, that friction is entirely gone. Anyone, anywhere can upload a 4K video globally in an instant.
Exactly. The barrier to entry is effectively zero.
But what do we lose when we no longer have that localized face-to-face friction, when you don't have to physically look someone in the eye and hand them a tape to be judged and shared in a dark room? Does the total frictionless ease of the internet actually water down the rebellious, challenging spirit of truly underground art?
It's a great question. When everything is instantly available to everyone, perhaps the true radical act is finding a way to create an experience that still demands our complete undivided attention.
Something to think about the next time you find yourself endlessly swiping through a feed. Keep looking for the hidden stories behind the media you consume, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.